Plastic. I love it. In my last video, I was listing off some things that the UK government has done to limit the freedom of the UK citizens, in my opinion. And one of those things included the new charge for for carrier bags in supermarkets and other shops. Previously, the minimum you could charge for a carrier bag was 5p, and the recent announcement is that it's going up to 10p. A few people, although they agreed with the spirit of my video in general, were surprised that I was against a carrier bag charge and considered it an infringement on my freedom, often citing environmental causes to be sort of either more important or just necessary for the country. Like the reducing of plastic waste, in the opinion of these commenters, was more important than the trivial freedom of being able to give out plastic bags for free, or to be able to receive plastic bags for free. And although I'd agree that it is a fairly trivial point, and I'm not really, like I said in the video, I don't think it's something worth starting a revolution over, I do want to make a point just about plastic in general, because it's an amazing modern invention, just the range of plastics that we can now use, and it's something that makes our lives a lot better. That's why it's so ubiquitous, is that it's a great material, rather it's a great class of materials. But specifically, I'm going to be talking about carrier bags and why I don't really believe in the carrier bag charge as a good environmental policy, or just a good policy in general. For starters, I want to explain, although you probably already know instinctively, why it is that we use plastic in carrier bags an awful lot. It's waterproof. It doesn't retain moisture, which means that it's a lot more resistant to carrying bacteria than, say, paper, cardboard, or canvas. It doesn't absorb moisture. It's durable. It means you can take a plastic bag and stretch it, or drop it, and it won't sort of shatter the way that the glass will, or for instance. It's a great material for carrying things. It's very light. You can have 1,000 plastic bags in all within inside a cardboard box or container. You can pack them very small, is what I mean. I've seen some wonderful footage of the very thin plastic bags that you used to be able to get for free. The way that those are made, the machine that makes the sheets of plastic into bags produces like a dozen a second. It's really amazing to see. So they're obviously very cheap to make. So cheap, in fact, that the supermarkets used to just give them away for free. And you could take as many as you want. There was no limit to, you could just grab like 10 if you wanted. I don't think they would stop you, although you might get some strange looks. But of course, plastic waste is a problem. Plastic doesn't degrade the way that cardboard does, for instance. It's going to be on the planet after you make something out of plastic. It's going to be in that form for many thousands of years, possibly even. You can melt it down if it's certain kinds of plastic, put it into another form, but it's still going to be in plastic. It's still going to be there. The plastic will still be there. It'll just be melted down into a kind of heap or pile or something, depending on how it gets disposed of, right? And this is the thing that people don't like about plastic, is that all of this, what they call single-use plastic, such as carrier bags, they end up getting disposed of in large quantities, and the used ones discarded. It seems like a big waste, and once they're discarded, they just stick around on the planet, probably for thousands of years. And they also get into oceans. They disrupt the water, and they wash up on islands, and it makes for some great photos that get people very upset. And I'm not here to diminish any of that. I'm just trying to put it into perspective, into context of the world. I went to a great presentation recently by a plastics manufacturer, or rather a plastics distributor, who was talking about all the different kinds of environmentally friendly plastic, because environmentally friendly can be referencing a lot of different things. You can be talking about something that is very low energy to make. Obviously, global warming is a big issue at the moment. Everybody's trying to save on energy. So if something is very low energy to make, it requires a very small amount of energy to make it, that's obviously a good thing. And also, if it's light, a lot of plastics are very light, they use less energy transporting them. Obviously, if you have a truck full of plastic, or compared to if it's glass, for instance, it's going to be very cheap to get that along the road, and you don't have to use as much petrol. That could be one way it could be environmentally friendly, right? Or you could have a plastic that degraded. There's a lot of plastics that are being developed at the moment, and some that already have been developed, that once treated, after you finish using them, you can treat them in a certain way, and that will break down the plastic. They won't stick around the earth for thousands of years. That, of course, has its own cost, because there's an extra step in the life cycle of that product. Now it needs to be manufactured, used, then treated, then it can be disposed of somehow. And the treatment process has to have its own manufacture process behind that, obviously. You can also have recyclable plastics. Those are plastics, obviously, that you can, once it's been sorted into a kind of a batch of all that kind of plastic, you can melt it down and make it into new things. And all of these plastic bags, I've got a few here to show you. These bags from Tesco brag, they say that they're made of at least 80%. 80% of this bag comes from old plastic packaging. So it can be, obviously, you can make plastic into other plastic products. That's another way that it can be environmentally friendly. But all of those things are not, they're not all, it's very difficult to get a plastic with one plastic that has all of these properties. In fact, it's almost impossible. These things are pretty mutually exclusive. Having something that degrades, obviously that plastic, it's going to be quite difficult to recycle it if it tends to degrade more. It's not going to want to be used again. The thing with plastic, I also think I believe that it gets less effective at its structural properties start to break down and more gets recycled. And obviously recycling plastic also costs more energy, right? Because you have to, once all of the rubbish has been sorted out, you then need to take the plastic to a place where it can be recycled. So it actually uses a lot of energy to do any kind of recycling. This is all just to say that if you want to use plastic in a environmentally conscious way, you have to decide what environmentally conscious means. Does it mean using less energy? Does it mean breaking down the plastic? Does it mean reusing the plastic? Or does it mean not using plastic at all? Which is also something I'm going to talk about. All things considered, the carrier bag charge seems to be rather arbitrary to me. Everything we buy, pretty much every single thing you can buy in a supermarket is contained in plastic. And even if it's not contained in plastic, it's a glass jar or a can, it's usually got a laminated label on it that contains plastic to stop the paper from just wearing away, to stop the ink wearing away. And it's almost certainly been packaged before it gets to the supermarket. It's been packaged in plastic, in packing peanuts, in not cling film, in bubble wrap. To take one part of your shopping trip, the bag that you get at the end, and to say that plastic now needs an additional charge, it seems rather arbitrary to me. The idea that all of the other plastic that your food comes in that will just be thrown away, it's just single use, right? All that it's used for is packaging that. This Tropicana bottle, I'm not going to use that again, or maybe I will. I mean, I used it to film this video, but that's all single use. This is a single use plastic. This cap is single use plastic. This label is single use plastic. By weight, this bottle uses a lot more plastic than a bag, and this is the kind of bag that we used to have before this carry bag charge. It's a very thin bag. It's extraordinarily thin, actually, and yet it is quite strong as well. But the amount of plastic is I'd say it's probably a third of the amount of plastic that's in here. And that's just one thing. I'm probably, if I go shopping and fill this bag up with 12 items, I think I'm going to probably exceed the amount of plastic in this bag over 15 times. There's going to be over 15 times the amount of plastic contained within the bag than the plastic comprising the bag itself. So why should the bag get a special treatment, get a special charge that it needs to be paid? I think this could be summed up by something I saw in one of the comments that I saw that said, and I don't want to shame this person, but I did think it was funny. They said that all non-essential plastic should be banned. And I just had to laugh, and I even showed my husband, because all plastic is non-essential. Like, the human race survived for many, many thousands of years without plastic. Like, there's nothing in your life that's actually essential other than food, water, and air, right? And probably shelter and that sort of thing. The plastic isn't essential, it just makes our lives better. We could replace all plastic in the world with cardboard, canvas, and glass, and it would make our lives worse. There's no... Of course, there's a spectrum of things that are more useful to less useful, but to decide as a government which things are required and which things are not required, which things are kind of luxury items, which I know is actually a distinction the government does make in VAT, but still, I think to add a tax is one thing, and that at least would be less arbitrary than doing the plastic bag charge. But still, to say that we're going to ban all non-essential plastic items as defined by the government is completely bananas to me, and even the concept is completely backwards, the idea of an essential plastic. And what's more, the bag is actually much more useful to me than most of the single-use plastic contained within it in my regular shopping. I'm probably one of many families that uses the plastic bag after we buy it. We use it as a bin. We don't have a tall plastic container that we put a bin liner in. We use carrier bags. We hang it up on the wall. It's actually a really good way of disposing of your rubbish, on a completely different subject, but we don't have a big bin liner that you have to pull out of the bin and then tie in a knot and then take that out, and it's really heavy. It's just a bag full of rubbish. It's just a one carrier bag of rubbish. So all of the carrier bags, before the charge and after the charge, in my house get used for bins. And there are also other families who have dogs who use those bags to pick up dog mess. I heard a statistic a few years ago. It's completely left my mind now, but it was a pretty large percentage of a pretty large percentage of carrier bags from supermarkets get reused. The idea that most of them just go straight in the bin after they've been used once is not necessarily correct. A lot of people use them again. So in that sense, they are more useful than the Tropicana bottle or any other kind of plastic container that you get your shopping in. There's a government report into how effective the carrier bag charge has been in reducing the number of carrier bags being used and just the environmental impact of the carrier bag charge. And it does seem that the number of carrier bags that are being used has gone down. Rather, the amount that's being given away in shops or sold has decreased, as you might expect, because of the charge. But the real interesting question is whether the amount of plastic used in the bags has gone down or not. Because after the charge was put in place, something kind of interesting happened, and the supermarkets, Tesco, which is where I shop normally, did something interesting where they stopped selling this kind of bag because consumers know that this kind of bag is not worth 5 pence. They started selling this thick. It was exactly like this design, but it was thick plastic. I think it was probably 2 or 3 times thicker, the plastic, so that you could put a 6-pack of cans of beer or whatever. You could put your cans of beans in the bottom, and it wouldn't tear the bag because it was thicker, just thick enough to be that you wouldn't need to double bag it when you get a bottle of wine or something, as you sometimes do. They stopped doing that now, and they now sell these bags, which are admittedly made of recycled plastic, but they are much, much thicker. I think there's probably 5 times maybe as much plastic in this bag as there was in the traditional carrier bag. So the amount of plastic that is being used for carrier bags now, it's not clear whether that's gone down or up. You've also got these kinds of bags, which are incredibly thick. It's called a bag for life. And I don't know if you can tell just from the sound it's making that it's much stiffer. And it's got this kind of canvas handle. And it's kind of sewn on. It looks like to produce... I think these cost about £1. And you can tell there's a lot of plastic in that. The report that I'm talking about, the government report on plastic bags, said that you need to use this something ridiculous like 100 times in order to make it worth, the savings of getting... In terms of plastic, you need to use this 100 times in order to make it worth not getting the carrier bags. And it's an interesting question as to whether the people who buy bags like this actually do use them 100 times. Canvas bags like this, you know the kind of talking about, like a canvas tote bag with a big long handle. These bags are environmentally the worst of all. Even if they don't have any plastic in, they are made of cotton, or at least partially made of cotton. And the thing with cotton is that you need fields of cotton to grow in order to make this bag, unless it's made of like reused textiles, which they usually aren't. They're actually quite fashionable items now, and that makes me believe that they're actually probably not being reused that much, because, you know, the thing is with clothes and bags and accessories is that they often have like a life cycle of a year or two before the people who have them get a bit bored of them and want to get a new one. But going back to my point about cotton is that cotton requires a lot of water to grow it, and it requires a lot of land, and you really don't know exactly, you know, how much forest has been cleared to make that field. You don't know what that field would have been used for otherwise if it wasn't used to grow cotton for tote bags. It's such a complex issue when you just looking into bags and plastic. I'm not trying to give you any particular manifesto here about like how I hate bags or love them or plastic or whatever, or whether I hate recycling or anything like that. I'm just trying to indicate to you how complicated it is, and how morally it's just even morally in the questions that you can ask yourself, there's a lot that needs to be answered. And for the government to charge every person for carrier bags, and as a kind of universal way of saying, well, carrier bags are bad and we shouldn't be using them. You shouldn't be using them. You need to use them less. Therefore, we're going to implement this charge. We're going to take away this small amount of freedom from shops and from shoppers to use these free bags that they used to have, for the reason that we think that these bags are bad for the environment, in a very vague way. It's not at all clear to me that preventing that reducing the number of carrier bags, not the amount of plastic, that reducing the number of carrier bags given away or sold in supermarkets is actually environmentally beneficial. To disincentivize people from using their preferred shopping carrying device and telling them that they should be using something else is to coerce them in a way that it's not letting them choose themselves what is best. It's a complicated issue, and what this government report shows is that even the government isn't really sure what environmental impact this is going to have. I'll leave a link to it in the description. I know this has been a pretty confused, rambling video, but to sum it up, the thing with plastic bags or plastic or any environmental issues that you wish to care about, it's important to ask one of Thomas Sowell's favourite questions, which was, at what cost? If you want to save on waste plastic, at what cost are you willing to do that? If you can burn 1,000 kilojoules of excess energy in order to save a kilogram of plastic, is that a net benefit or not? If you need to take down, a kilometre square of rainforest to save a kilogram of plastic, would you do that? If it cost £1 million to save on a kilogram of plastic, would you do that? You have to decide at what cost you're willing to do these things. And I think that is a decision that is not as easy as just saying, oh, well, bags should cost 10p, bags should cost 5p. That's a decision that it's extremely complex, and I think that should be left to the consumer, to the citizen. The problem with these interventions is that they're just, it's just way too simple to imply that this one fix is going to make exactly the change that you want to make and no other, right? It's not going to... The very fact that the plastic bags got thicker after they started charging for them is probably not something the government wanted to happen, but the supermarkets have to do it because they know that consumers are going to get pretty annoyed if they're getting charged for the same thing that they got for free for years. They're now being charged 5p for. They're going to rather buy something that looks like it costs 5p to make. But anyway, I think that's all I have to say about that. I hope when I'm editing this, I'm able to make some sort of coherent narrative from what I've been saying. But otherwise, I hope you've enjoyed this rant about plastic bags. Hope you have a great day. Please leave your comments as always, and I'll see you again soon.